Hello everyone. This video will talk about the salient features or characteristics of the K-12 basic education curriculum. Specifically, this will discuss the framework of the K-12 basic education curriculum. So, framework of the K-12 basic education. This is from the curriculum guide that is uploaded on the Department of Education. First, we will try to briefly explain the theories here of language learning and acquisition and theories of language. So these three theories serves as the guide, or everything that is included on the framework is anchored on these three. So on the framework, these three are presented as the following. First is the philosophy and the rationale. Next is the guiding principles. And third is the principles of an effective language arts and multiliteracy curriculum. So first we'll proceed with the philosophy and the rationale. So these three statements summarizes the definition or the meaning of language. First is language is the basis of all communication and the primary instrument of thought. Next, thinking, learning, and language are interrelated. And language is governed by rules and systems which are used to explore and communicate. I think the meaning of language and the importance of language, which is discussed on this first part of the philosophy of the rationale, is already discussed on our topics about the language and the like, as well as in your other subjects. So the next set, which can be seen on this slide, focuses on the roots or the reasons for studying language. So let's try to read this and explain one by one. Defines culture, which is essential in understanding oneself, forming interpersonal relationships, extending experiences, reflecting on thought and action, and contributing to a better society. Next, language, therefore, is central to the people's intellectual, social, and emotional development and has an essential role in all key learning areas. And lastly, proficiency in the language enables people to access, process, and keep abreast of information, to engage with the wider and more diverse groups. So, in general, the following states the importance of language and the use of language, as well as the reason for studying language. After this, we will proceed with the guiding principles. These are the guiding principles of the framework I, that was presented a while ago. First is all languages are interrelated and interdependent. So this first principle can be seen or it's influenced by the concept of common underlying proficiency, which states that the cognitive and literary skills established in the mother tongue or the first language will transfer across languages. So this is the reason why mother tongue, Filipino, and English were all given the same importance in kindergarten to grade 3 because the Department of Education or through the framework, they believe that the knowledge on the mother tongue, which should be mastered, can be used in learning the second and the other languages. Next is language acquisition and learning is an active process that begins at birth and continues throughout life. So through this principle, the activities or the learning opportunities that are provided to the student combines the process of both acquisition and learning. Next is learning requires me. Next is learners learn about language and how to use it effectively through their engagement with and study of text. So in the language curriculum or in the English subject, the students or the learners are exposed or presented with different genres and text from Philippine and other literatures. Next is successful language learning involves viewing, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So it's not only improving one of the macro skills, it's successfully integrating one and improving all of these or enhancing all of these through different activities. Lastly, language learning involves recognizing, accepting, valuing, and building on students' existing language competence, including the use of non-standard forms of language and extending the range of language available to us. So, language learning is not primarily about the memorization or the grammar rules. It's it also involves values, and the use of language is far from the modules or far from what can be seen on the formal language. But it means using examples or language or text that are familiar with us. Since when we become teachers or when you become teachers, you will encounter students from different localities. So you should use the language or the words that are familiar to them. Like in the Philippines, for the students to understand you, you will use things or objects that can be seen by the students every day and that are not familiar with them, just like snow, zebra, cheetah. All of those are not seen in our country, right? So after this, we will proceed with the principles of an effective language arts and multiliteracy curriculum. First is it develops thinking and language through interactive learning. Next is develops communicative competence and critical literacy. All of these will be discussed on the later part of this video. Third is draws on literature in order to develop students' understanding of their literary heritage. Fourth is draws on informational texts and multimedia in order to build vocabulary, and strong content knowledge. Fifth, develop students' oral language and literacy, appropriately challenging learning. Next, emphasizes writing arguments, explanatory or informative texts, and narratives. 7. Provides skill instruction in reading and writing. Number 8. Builds on the language, experiences, knowledge, and interest that students bring to school. 9. Nurtures students' sense of their common ground in using language or languages for communication. As present or future global citizens, prepare them to participate in school and in civic life, and lastly, assesses and reflects the student's ability to interpret and communicate in the target. So all of these principles, if not in on the domains that are presented or used by the PEP-ed, that will be seen on the later part of the slide. After the theory with the outcomes of the language grade. First is communicative competence. Communicative competence is a synthesis of knowledge of basic grammatical principles, knowledge of how language is used in social settings to perform communicative functions, and how language or utterances and communicative functions can be combined according to the principles of school. So this communicative competence is classified into four competencies. Is the grammatical or the linguistic competence. It is the acquisition of logical rules, morphological words, that basically grammatical competence is about having the knowledge on the basic grammar rules, just like the speech, the basic sentence pattern, the correct action, the sound, and the formation of words. Sociolinguistic competence. So this sociolinguistic competence refers to the learning of pragmatic aspects, the cultural values, norms, and cultural conventions in social contexts. So basically, sociolinguistic competence is about knowing the appropriate language in different contexts. So it's knowing the correct language to use if you are faced with person, or if you're asked to communicate with people with different sex, age, social cultural did work like. Third is force competence. It is the knowledge of rules regarding the content of various types of discourse. So if linguistic competence is about knowing the appropriate language in various contexts, discourse competence is about familiar with the appropriate structure or language within a particular genre. So it's knowing how a news or the language in a from a language in a conversation. It's knowing when to use which. Lastly, strategic competence is to do or has to do with the knowledge of verbal and nonverbal strategies to compensate for breakdowns such as self-correction and at the same time to enhance the effectiveness of correction, such as recognizing score structure, activate age, contextual guessing, and tolerating. So, in other words, strategic competence is the ability to recognize and repair communication breakdowns before, during, or after they occur. For example, if I do not know a certain word and I am talking, I would rather paraphrase it or to bridge the gap that I do not know the certain or some. Or if not, I will ask the audience in order to deliver what I'm about to say without actually saying that certain. So paraphrasing is an example of context. After the communicative competence, we'll now with next out, which is the multiliteracy. Multiliteracy practices recognize that there are many kinds of literacy at work within our society. These include traditional literary practices using texts, as well as new literacy practices using text of popular culture such as films. Social literacy encompasses how we communicate, change meaning in our society, while professional literacy links with the notion of literacy for and of the workplace. So through multiliteracy skills, learners will be able to appreciate and be sensitive to sociocultural diversity and understand that the meaning of any form of communication depends on context, purpose, and what. So after the outcomes, we're going to now so this the first component is the language learning process. So the first component illustrates learning processes that will affect acquisition and learning of the language. In other words, it explains the how of language learning and therefore serves as guiding principles for language teaching. So the first language learning process is spiral progression. By this spiral progression affects other subjects in the 12th grade. Reading the definition, spiral progression is having the not the same almost related topics and as the year level or as the child progresses, the level of difficulty of the subject of the topic also increases. So it's good to have this spiral progression since the students will not be confused about almost every year the topics are reviewed or recorded, but we keep facing difficulty. The next is interaction. So language learning will be situated in the context of communication, both in oral and written communication. Activities that simulate real life situations of varying language demands will be employed to help students interact with thereby improve their socialization. After the we will now have the third, which is integration. So, integration is not just about the integration of the different skills in language learning. It's also integration of the other topics, skills, theme, content, and so this is observed in language learning. Next is the learner-centeredness. Okay, I think this is one of the easiest terms among these language learning processes. So in this learner-centeredness, learners are at the center of the teaching learning process. Teaching will be differentiated according to student abilities and interests. Effective pedagogy to be used to engage them and to strengthen their language development. So for our lesson will depend on the hence it's learner centered. So it's based on the student's capabilities, its background, student's age and like. Fifth is contextualization. Learning tasks and activities will be designed for learners to acquire the language in authentic and meaningful context of use. For instance, lesson will be planned around learning outcomes, a theme or a type of text to help learners use related language skills, grammatical items, structures, and vocabulary appropriate spoken and written language to suit the purpose, audience, context, and culture. So in this, for instance, grammar will not taught alone. It will be incorporated in different texts so that the learners or the students will know how to use the language in different situations. Lastly, for the first component is construction. So learning tasks and activities will be designed for learners in such a way that they will have time to reflect on and respond to ideas and information. Learners will be provided with sufficient scaffolding. This is the assistance given by teachers so that they will be able to reach their full cognitive, affective, and psychomotor potentials and become independent learners or good consumers and constructors of. So after the first component, we will now proceed with the second component, which is the effective language use. So component 2 describes knowledge and skill areas which are essential to effective language use, which will be developed through language arts or matter skills. The first on this list is understanding cultures. By the way, it's by frame. Learning language through text types and literary appreciation exposes learners to different cultures of the world, including one's culture. Learners develop sociolinguistic and sociocultural understandings and apply them to their use of the language for the mother tongue, Filipino, and English. So, so indeed, we can learn language and other cultures at the same time by reading literary pieces and analyzing literary pieces from the different parts of the world. Next is understanding language. So in this component, learners apply their language or their knowledge of the system of the language to assist them to make meaning and to create meaning. They come to recognize the patterns and rules of the language, which emerge as they interact with a plethora of text to me. So it's not only about recognizing the rules of language, it's also about using the language to make or its construct or using the language to construct other things to make. The third is process and strategies. So in this, learners select from a repertoire of processes and strategies by reflecting on their understanding of the way language works for a variety of purposes in the range of contexts. They deliberate on how they use language and apply different language strategies depending on their purpose, context, and audience. So the third component after this is making meaning through language. So the third component shows the interdependence and interrelationships of the macro skills of the language, namely listening, speaking, and viewing, reading, viewing and responding, and writing and representing, and the development of thinking skills, namely critical thinking, creative thinking, and mental, allowing students to make meaning through language. So I will give you time to read this since it's seen on the PowerPoint and it's also seen on the that was given or provided by the Department of Education. So on this, making meaning which this table shows integrated in its alignment on the five macro skills or subs. So if you can notice it here, as early as the grade primary, all of these are already developed. And it's not, or the our curriculum is not only focused on speaking or listening or reading. It's on the principles and the stuff that was discussed a while ago. Indeed, all of these macro skills are integrated language arts domain. So next after this, the fourth component, which explains holistic assessment. So assessment is an important aspect of learning and teaching. It should be effectively used to support the holistic development of our kids. Our assessment practices should go beyond summative evaluation and move towards a more holistic approach. So, may I repeat? The fourth component explains the holistic assessment of the language arts and literacy curriculum, which serves as feedback of its effectiveness to students, teachers, school administrators, and curriculum developers. So, the assessment in this curriculum, the K-12 not focus on the summative evaluation and test. No. So, these are the characteristics of the assessment in the language arts curriculum. Holistic assessment refers to the ongoing gathering of information on different facets of a child from various sources, with the aim of providing quantitative feedback to support and guide the child's development. So it's not That's why there are written works and performance tasks in the or assessment of the child's learning or development. Also, holistic assessment informs our teacher of their teaching practices and guides them in the design and delivery of student learning. It will also enable parents to support their children's development. So the next slides will tackle the characteristics of assessment. First is proximity to actual language use and performance. Assessment procedures should be based on activities that have authentic communicative function rather than ones with little or no intrinsic communicative value. These activities are based on actual performance in the authentic situations which the learner is likely to encounter in his or her. Next is a holistic view of language. So, assessment procedures are based on the notion that the interrelationships among the various aspects of language, such as phonology, grammar, and vocabulary, among others, cannot be ignored. Also, the four skills of language, listening, speaking, reading, writing, are seen to be parts of a structurally integrated approaches should be used for communication and self-expression. Assessment also takes into account the whole learner and his or her social, academic, and physical context. So it's not or quiz or outputs alone is not only the basis of assessment. So it also involves demonstration or practice of the language, the application of language, and like. Third is an integrative view of learning. Assessment attempts to capture the learner's total array of skills and abilities. It measures language proficiency in the context of specific subject matter. Assessment procedures are based on the idea that various aspects of learner's life are integral to the development of language proficiency and cannot be ignored. These dimensions not only processes such as acquiring knowledge, extending and refining knowledge, and using knowledge, but also issues such as varying students' attitudes towards learning. So this is included, I think that should not just the technical or the development of the math skills. Developmental appropriateness. So assessment procedures set expectations that are appropriate within the cognitive, social, and academic development of the learner. This characteristic of assessment makes it particularly valuable for second language learners who come from culturally diverse backgrounds and who may have a typical educational experience. Multiple reference. Assessment entails obtaining information about the learner from numerous sources and through various means. For students should allow them to see their own in terms that they understand, allows them to assume responsibility for this. In addition, assessment should allow parents to share in the educational process and offers them a clear insight into what their children are doing in school. For teachers, primary advantage of is that it provides data on theirs and their classroom for educational decision. In addition, supports the success of and culture with dream for organ. I think success work, which is about the holistic aspect. So I hope that at some point got to know or got a little idea about the that are included in this framework of the basic education. This is from the, if I'm not mistaken, this is also applicable in other languages, elementary or in grade school. There are three languages are involved: the mother tongue, Philippine, and so. If you have questions, I wish to see them on the comments on this video and on our. So thank you for this presentation. Keep safe and take